Ford didn't show off a flashy car to impress America in 1952. Instead, they released a car that many people said was boring, plain, and easy to forget. But this car was the main reason Ford was able to keep up with Chevrolet and Plymouth in the sales race. That car was the Ford Mainline. Think about this. There was no shiny chrome, no fancy comforts, and not even a regular radio. Everything was too much. A car that was just big enough to move. But hundreds of thousands of Americans chose it. So the Mainline became an important part of family life after the war. And maybe you or someone in your family used to own a car like this. What made a cheap car so closely linked to the memories of a whole generation? Let's work together to find out. The United States was changing quickly in the early 1950s. New cars were taking over the streets. Suburbs were spreading across the land. And a whole generation of young families was looking for their first car. If you ask your parents or grandparents, they might tell you that cars weren't seen as luxury items anymore. It had become as important as the TV or fridge in the living room. Ford was well aware of this. After the war, the company had a hard time competing with Chevrolet and Plymouth. Ford came out with a completely new line of cars for 1952, which was split into 3 tiers in order to get back some of its market share. The main line is basic, the custom line is mid-range, and the crest line is premium. This wasn't just a way to make sales. Ford used it to understand American society. The main line was made for families who were buying their first car and needed a reliable one at the lowest price. The custom line was for people who wanted more comfort, and the crest line was for people who wanted style and luxury. This was a smart move because it gave Ford a clear place in each customer group instead of trying to sell the same car to everyone. You could easily see the main line when you walked into a Ford dealership in 1952. The crest line shone with chrome to catch everyone's eye, but the main line stood still and looked plain, almost humble. The main line's body was square and neat, with straight lines running from front to back. There wasn't anything fancy about the grille. It just had a simple horizontal bar design. The round headlights were evenly spaced on both sides, which gave it the classic Ford look. Production costs stayed low because there wasn't much chrome. But the car also had a useful and honest look. The main line came in a few different body styles: a 2-door sedan, a 4-door sedan, a business coupe, and a station wagon. Each one was appealing to a different buyer. The coupe or 2-door sedan was popular with singles and young couples, while the 4-door sedan or wagon was more popular with bigger families. This variety made the mainline feel less limited, even though it was Ford's entry-level model. It was interesting that the car had simple body creases that made it look strong and upright. The roofline wasn't too low, which made the mainline look both practical and reliable. This wasn't a design that was meant to impress, it was meant to make people feel safe. What a middle-class family in the 1950s needed most. The station wagon was definitely the best part. It quickly became the best choice for road trips, picnics, and small-scale hauling because of its long body, wide rear gate, and great cargo space. You wouldn't find shiny chrome trim or soft leather seats inside the cabin. Instead, the seats were covered in strong cloth that could last for years of daily use, like going to work and taking family trips on the weekends. The dashboard was simple and clean, with a round speedometer and only a few important controls. There wasn't a radio. If you wanted to listen to music or the news while driving, you had to pay extra. The heater, which is very important in colder parts of the US, was often just an option instead of the default. That may sound harsh by today's standards, but think back to that time. A middle-class American family didn't expect their first car to be a luxury. They needed a car that would start every morning, take their kids to school, take them to church on Sundays, and stay within their budget. The Mainline did just that. The inside space also showed how useful it was. The 2-door sedan was a good choice for younger buyers who wanted something small. The 4-door sedan was better for bigger families because it had more room. The wagon was the most useful because the back seat could fold down to make room for more stuff. Many homemakers and family men liked this feature. When you opened the hood of a 1952 Ford Mainline, you would see engine options that were perfect for the car's practical purpose. Ford gave people two options. There was a straight six engine with 215 cubic inches and about 101 horsepower, and the famous flathead 58 engine with 239 cubic inches and 100 horsepower. The six-cylinder engine actually made a little more power than the V8, which is interesting. A small contradiction that made a lot of buyers stop and think. The flathead 58, which came out in 1932, was already famous in American car culture. It was simple, easy to fix, and had a sound that fans loved. But by the early 1950s, the design was starting to look old. Bad cooling, not enough airflow, and performance that wasn't as good as the competition's anymore. Ford kept it in the mainline as the traditional choice for loyal V8 fans. People thought that the 215 Ci in an inline six was a good engine for the average person. It was stronger, used less gas, and was easier to take care of, which were all things that working-class families cared about more than speed. The I-6 mainline became very popular in rural areas where cost and dependability were most important because it was cheaper. A column-mounted shifter controlled the three-speed manual transmission that came standard on main lines. This is a picture that many people still remember well. The Ford automatic transmission was available for people who wanted more convenience. At the time, it was a new idea, but it came with a price. The mainline was never meant to be a powerhouse in terms of performance. The top speed was between 80 and 85 mph, and the acceleration was steady rather than thrilling. What mattered more was that it was strong enough to carry a family and their luggage, go up hills, and go on long trips without worrying about breaking down all the time. That was the real meaning of performance for a lot of Americans. The Mainline was Ford's cheapest car, starting at only $1,500 to $1,700. To put that in perspective, the average American household made about $3,500 a year. This meant that the Mainline was a good investment that the growing middle class could easily afford. Ford smartly marketed the Mainline as the car that was just right. It didn't have any flashy chrome, had few features, and even basic things like a radio or heater were optional. But that very simplicity kept costs low, so both workers and farmers could go to a dealership and buy a new car. For a lot of people, just owning a Ford, even the most basic one, was enough to feel like they were living the American dream. The arrival of the Mainline quickly shook up the market. End of story. Newspapers said it was a good enough car, focusing on how reliable and useful it was instead of how flashy it was. As expected, hundreds of thousands of families chose the Mainline, making it one of Ford's best-selling cars from 1952 to 1954. People who bought the cars never felt like they were getting a second-hand car, which is interesting. The Ford badge was still proudly displayed on the front, which was enough to make people proud. For a lot of people, the Mainline was their first car. It took them to work, took the kids to school, and drove the family to church on Sundays. The strategy worked because the sales numbers showed it. Ford was able to hold its own against Chevrolet, which was still a strong competitor thanks to this entry-level model. The Mainline wasn't a big deal in the news or a trendsetter in design, but it was Ford's secret sales machine, a car that sold a lot and made strong connections with the growing middle class in the United States. We need to compare the Mainline to other lines from the same time period to fully understand its role. Chevrolet's main competitor, the Style line, had more chrome, flashier designs, and a more upscale image. But that cost more, and it was often more than what an average middle-class family could comfortably afford. Plymouth's Concorde, on the other hand, held onto its old-fashioned 1940s style and lost ground with younger buyers. The Mainline took a smarter path somewhere in the middle, not too old-fashioned or expensive, but based on the practical and well-known Ford brand. Ford's three-tier strategy, which included the Mainline, Custom Line, and Crest Line, made the Mainline's strategic position even clearer. It was the entry point that brought in first-time buyers, who then moved up to higher trims. In other words, the Mainline was the base, and the Custom Line and Crest Line were like the steps on a ladder that kept customers coming back to Ford. This meant that there was always a Ford for you, no matter how rich or poor you were. Most importantly, the Mainline made sure that Ford was always a part of the family's daily decisions. It didn't have to shine, but it was always brought up when people talked about their first car. And while sedans were common in cities, it was the wagon version that really changed the way American families lived. There wasn't much to the outside of the Mainline wagon. It has a long, boxy body with little chrome and no fake wood trim like higher-end models, but this simplicity made it easy to use and cheap. Families who needed a car that could handle both everyday tasks and weekend trips loved it because of its wide-opening tailgate and large cargo area. One of its best features was how adaptable it was. The back seat folded down flat, making the wagon a mobile cargo haulier. This was especially helpful for farmers or small business owners who needed a car for both personal use and light hauling. Many Americans still remember loading the wagon with crates, bikes, or suitcases before going on a long trip. Ford's plan to make cars for everyone was perfectly shown by the Mainline wagon. It wasn't as pricey as the Crestline Country Squire, but it was useful enough for most people. It let young families in the suburbs buy a brand new station wagon without going over their budget. The wagon version has become the real star among collectors today. Sedans are easier to find, but surviving Mainline wagons are very rare and usually cost more because of their symbolic value. For a lot of fans, a Mainline wagon is more than just an old car. It takes you back to memories of family road trips and a time when cars were a big part of the American dream. The Mainline's value on the classic car market depends a lot on its condition and body style. A drivable sedan usually costs between $10,000 and $15,000, but a wagon in its original condition can easily sell for more than $25,000, and fully restored examples can sell for even more. This shows that collectors are not just buying a machine, they are buying the history and the story that are in it. It's interesting that the Mainline was never meant to be a luxury collectible like modern Cadillacs or Chryslers. People value it for its simplicity and authenticity, not the other way around. People who collect things like the Mainline because it tells the stories of regular families, not the rich and powerful. A Mainline at a classic car show can bring back strong memories for people who had one in their driveway when they were kids. The wagon is most interesting because it is so closely tied to collective memory. A sedan might make you think of your daily commute, but a wagon makes you think of the whole family being together. Kids laughing in the back, parents talking in the front, and weekend trips with no plans other than to have fun together. That's why collectors see the Mainline wagon as more than just a valuable item. It's an emotional symbol of a whole generation. And now I want to hear from you. Yes, you, the people watching. Did your family ever own a Ford Mainline, or do you have memories of a car that was like it? Please share them in the comments because personal stories can make history come to life. Hit the like button, subscribe, and ring the bell if you liked this video, so you don't miss the next classic car story. Also, don't forget to tell your friends and family who love old cars about this video. They might find something from their past again.